All right, live, adding Facebook. All right, so we are live on Facebook and the multiple channels on Facebook and YouTube. We'll give it some time for people to come in. Welcome, Charles Lee. Charles Lee already has a question. And John and Jayanta, welcome. Welcome, Sin. Aloha. Are you on the islands right now? From Hawaii? Welcome, Sophia, Amaranta, Nico, friend from Facebook. I don't know the script. All right. Okay, friends, so we will get started. It is monk chat. So that means this is time for asking of questions. So if you have questions, then feel free to type them in the chat and I'll go through them. So questions related to anything to Buddhism, meditation, monasticism, anything proper questions for a monastic. So Charles Lee has the first question. Can animals and insects learn and practice any Dhamma? So, the animal realm is quite diverse. In general, I would say no. I would say that no, they can't practice any Dhamma. Nor would I say that they could really learn any Dhamma as animals. It's debatable, depending on the animal, that there's any karmic action of what they do, right? Because animal realm is considered to be like based on instinct, right? Most animals do not have the awareness to decide this is skillful, this is unskillful, right? So realms like the hell realm, realms like the heaven realm, realms like the animal realm, these realms are usually considered to be places where you're kind of just there and you're exhausting previous karma. And then once that's done, then you are born again. So this is also something that's very important. This is why human life is so rare, so precious. It's because this is the most ideal place to be able to practice the Dhamma, to learn the Dhamma. If you're in the heaven realms, you're too blissed out. Most beings in the heaven realms can't care about the Dhamma. They don't even know that they're impermanent. In the suttas, the Buddha is talking to the devas, and he tells them they're impermanent, and they freak out. I thought I was permanent, but no, I'm impermanent. Right? In the hell realms, it's too much suffering. You can't do it. You can't do much anything but suffer. So this is why human realm is the best realm. It's the realm that we want to be able to be born into so that we can listen to the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. How to truly attain nirvana. This one's easy. Follow the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is the path that leads to the ending of our suffering. That's how you truly attain nibbana or nirvana. Follow the Noble Eightfold Path. This is what you need to do. There's no other special super secret thing to do other than that. If you follow the Noble Eightfold Path, if you integrate the Noble Eightfold Path into your life so much that you become an avatar of it, you personify it, you live it in all of your actions, then you're well on your way to awakening in this life or 100 lifetimes from now. Niku has a question. Can you see your friends in the Pure Land? Yeah, you can see your friends, not only your friends, but your relatives and your mother and father. You know where you can see them? In every being that you meet. Remember, the Buddha says that you'd be hard-pressed to meet somebody who at one point wasn't your mother, father, siblings, relative. So no matter who you meet in any state of existence, you've had some kind of connection with them. Now, this could be also in the Pure Land too. That's fine. But you have to understand that it's not like this is not like a Christian version of heaven where it's like, this is me, and then me goes to heaven, and then I see all my family and friends. That's not how it works in Buddhism. Right? That's not how it works in samsara. Most of what is you in this life is given up at the end of it. In this life, I'm a human male. The next life, I could be a female kangaroo. And the afterlife, then life after that, I could be a deva. Who knows? Right? And so the people that I know in this life, I might see them again in other lives, but I probably wouldn't even know. Right? Because they're not going to be the same. This is one of the reasons why it's really good to practice gratitude and not wasting any time to be with your loved ones and friends in this life, because you don't know when or how you will be together again in the future. Welcome, Roberta from Reno. What meaning is the Dhamma, Bhante? I'm just assuming, I'm going to go ahead and assume you mean the word itself. What does Dhamma mean? So this word can mean a couple different things in a couple different contexts. It can mean the true nature of reality, the true nature of the world. It could also mean somebody's teaching. This is something that you can see in the suttas, that they'll say the Buddha taught his Dhamma, the Dhamma, but then another teacher taught their Dhamma, and another teacher taught their Dhamma. So it can be used in that context as the teaching. In the Buddhist context, it's also the nature of reality, because we have confidence that the Buddha was a fully awakened Buddha and understood the nature of reality. So his teaching is the nature of reality. So that's what Dhamma is. Dhamma also means basically all phenomena. So everything that you can experience. Right? Ajahn Chah, famous Thai monastic, says, what's the Dhamma? Or what is Dhamma? What isn't? That was more the question, because everything is Dhamma. Sophia has a question. Is it an obstacle to living a life in Dhamma and eventually going forth one day to spend a lot of time with friends, especially if it's people of the opposite gender? No, not really. I mean, when you become a monk, you spend a lot of time with other monks, even monks of the opposite gender, right? So this is something that is part of life. This is something that you have to understand and do so skillfully and wisely. Yes, there's such a thing as being overly attached, and that is something that if you do want to eventually go forth, that's something that you should observe and understand and investigate. On the other hand, as the Buddha says, if your friends are kalyanamitta, if they're good, skillful friends, if they are virtuous people and they encourage you in being virtuous and following your path, then the Buddha says what? To do everything in your power to stay with them. And so if you have good friends, especially if they're good Dhamma friends, right? So that when you're together, you can talk a lot of Dhamma and not about, politics and social issues and all these other kind of things, right? That's the Buddha gives that whole list of things, especially for monastics, to avoid getting involved in talking about politics of the well, as he said. So if you can have good kalyanamitta, then that's very good. That's important. So I would say it's not about having less friends or avoiding friends. I would say it's about cultivating good friends, cultivating skillful friends, especially those friends who are on the path, because those are friends that you can walk down the path with. Even monastics need that. Monastics definitely need that. So it also depends on what you mean by a lot of time. I mean, if you're spending hours and hours a day and not wanting to or having trouble being by yourself, that might be something to practice cultivating, being comfortable being by yourself. Because that is part of the monastic life, and it's also part of the spiritual life. When you go out, you go to a place and you go on retreat for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, you're around other people, but you're really by yourself. You have to be alone with your mind. And so if you're not really comfortable with that, then you can have a lot of suffering. So gradually practicing being alone with yourself more and more, it's a good thing. Tim has a question. I'm in a rut with my meditation, about 2 weeks of difficult sitting. Mind is all over the place. Any tips? Only 2 weeks? That's not bad. No, it's not. No, it's not bad. You cannot. One thing, a couple things. Every time you sit down, come to your sit. Really try to do your best to come to your sit with no expectations. Whatever your sit is going to be, it's going to be. Your job is just to investigate, to practice, to follow your breath, whatever you're doing, to learn from it. You have very little control over from this meditation to that meditation, from the first to the next, how that meditation is going to go. So practice letting go of any attachments to your meditation or any feeling that you want to control it or you want your meditation to be a certain way. That's the first thing. Whatever the meditation is, it's a new meditation. And you just go into it. You reflect, I know what I need to do. I'm going to do this practice. And then whatever happens, happens. The second thing is to understand that over the long course, right? I mean, I've been meditating for 17 years. And I've been a Buddhist, 14. Over the long course, it's lots of peaks and valleys. right? Peaks and valleys. You have highs, but you also have lows. That's the nature of the path. One of my favorite quotes from Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest master, is there's no happiness like the happiness of a Dhamma practitioner. There's no suffering like the suffering of a Dhamma practitioner. Dhamma practitioners are tops. So what is Ajahn saying there? Ajahn saying here, that's normal. It is absolutely normal that you will go in ruts. So you should expect that. You should know, okay, oh, I see, I'm in a rut. And a lot of times when I'm in a rut, what I do is I focus on investigating the rut, kind of observing my practice and kind of trying to see if I see any patterns, see if I see how different things arise. And also, I might try new things. I might try to do, more sitting meditation, or do less sitting and do more walking meditation, these kind of things. Alternating, trying different things, that's fine. But having the ability to endure, to recognize that this will pass, right? Even when you have a good meditation, don't get attached to it, because that's going to pass. When you're in a high, when you're having good insights and your meditation's going well, don't get attached to it. That's only temporary. It's going to pass. You're going to go in a rut. And when you're in a rut, same thing. That rut's not going to last forever. I also will go back to basics. If I'm feeling lost, if I'm feeling confused, I just go back to basics. What are the basics? Follow the Noble Eightfold Path. When I'm sitting, follow my breath, and that's it. Just going back to basics, remembering basics, not getting wrapped up in the mind that's overanalyzing what's going on or being agitated about it, or feeling sad about it or anything like that. Going back to basics, having no expectations, and, well, I guess in a way it might be a good thing to expect that you're going to be in ruts, right? It's more that when we expect good things and they don't happen, that we suffer in a way. But you should understand that your expectations, a lot of times you go into it's like, oh, okay, this meditation is going to be really bad. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it's like one of the most deep meditations you ever had. And you go, well, how did that happen? You don't know. You have to investigate the causes and conditions. If your mind's all over the place, investigate the mind. Is there a specific topic, or is there a specific focus of why it's all over the place? Try to observe what are the causes and conditions for that mind to be so agitated. Amaranta, can we be a Sotapanna as a layperson? Sure. Yeah, you can be a Sotapanna as a layperson. Also a once returner and a non-returner. Becoming an Arahant as a layperson is possible, but extremely rare. And those who become an Arahant as a layperson tend to be already living like a monastic. And once they become an Arahant, they're basically like, well, there's absolutely nothing for me in the lay life for the rest of my life. I'm just going to become a monastic. So that tends to be what happens. But yes, lay people can become Sotipannas. You can become a Sotipanna just on, if you're a faith follower, if you have strong faith, you can become a stream mentor just on faith. I can't speak to any experience from that because I'm more of what they call a Dhamma follower. I mean, I have to kind of, see things for myself and make my own mistakes. to develop confidence and faith in the Buddha as I have. But yeah, people can become stream mentors as lay people. Bhante Ji, my preceptor, he would always say, you should at the very least, you should always aspire to stream mentor in this life. Because once you become a stream mentor, it's a money back guarantee. He says that when you become a stream mentor, there's no more states of woe. Within 7 lifetimes, you're awakened, right? It's a good deal. So yeah, shoot for stream mentor. Make an aspiration for it. On my Discord Sangha community, back in the early days, it's about 6 years now. Back in the first years, we had this like dedicated group of like 20 somethings, and they all made the decision together that they were gonna go for stream entry. And they even like named themselves like Team Stream or the Stream Team, right? And so like there's like practicing, and I encouraged that. I thought that was pretty cool. You know, it's like as a monk, I'd be happy to become a stream mentor. I mean, obviously, I think ideally I'd want to become awakened in this life, but if I get stream entry as a consolation prize, I'm happy. You know, that means that even if I'm the most lazy stream mentor in existence, within 7 lifetimes, I'm awakened. It's a good deal. Welcome, Kumu. Nico says, can you gain nirvana by giving food like fruit, vegetables, and meat to a Buddhist altar instead of meditation? No, you can't. The Buddha is very, very clear that by doing these kind of rituals, this is not what brings you to awakening. They might be skillful in other ways. They might be skillful in to develop certain mind states on the path, but in and of themselves, no. As a matter of fact, when you become a stream mentor, one of the first 3 fetters that a stream mentor eradicates is Silabhata Paramasa. And this is connected to, at the time of the Buddha, people believe things like, I can become awakened if I bathe 3 times a day, right? Or if I make sacrifices to the fire, these kind of things. And the Buddha says, no, this is not how one becomes pure. This is not how you don't become pure by washing your body 3 times a day, right? And so you won't become awakened by giving fruits and vegetables to an altar. Even by giving fruits and vegetables to a monk, you won't just become awakened. That's only one aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. You have to follow the full Noble Eightfold Path to end your suffering and attain Nibbana. Sin has a question. Dear Ven, how can I best learn Dhamma and all of Buddha's teachings in order? I feel like I'm learning many things, but they are out of order from many sources. I sense missing something. So this is very common. I don't know how new you are to this, but in my experience, it's very common that for a good number of years, you're kind of in this kind of phase of just absorbing all the teachings. And as you do that over time, you start to notice the patterns. You start to see, what's important on the path, what's not important on the path, and things like this. I would also say it depends on what you mean by many sources, because multiple sources can be confusing. And what I say is this, like, if you're learning about a subject, what a Theravada monk would say and what a Mahayana monk would say can often conflict. They can be, equal. They can be on par, but they can often conflict. And that can be confusing. So what I would say is, in the early times is to try to see if there's a tradition that fits you the most, that really works with you best. That will help to kind of focus you in on the teachings. And then from there, it's okay. Your mind is going to be like a sponge. You're just going to keep learning. For years in the beginning, when I was practicing, I would go on this website called accesstoinsight.org, and they had this button. You can still go there, actually. It's called the random sutta button, and you just press it and a sutta comes up. And then I read the sutta and it's like, I don't get it. Next sutta. And a sutta comes up. And I read the suttas, and I'm reading and I'm studying and I'm learning and I'm listening to lots and lots of Dhamma talks. And I've focused in on Theravada, and then I focused in on the suttas. So, but even within that focus, there's still a huge diversity of understanding and practice. So it's what I would say is gradually look towards kind of like finding the focus that works best for you, finding the tradition that works best for you. And that will kind of help weed things out, sift things, because there's so much information out there that if you don't do that, you could just remain confused and kind of overwhelmed forever. There's a lot of things out there, and people can do kind of like window shopping or like delving little bits into different parts of Buddhism and different traditions and never end up going deep anywhere, because there's such a huge diversity. There's such a huge number of different practices and learnings that you can get lost in it. But what I would say is, if you really want to practice a focus on two things. Focus on Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path. If you keep your mind focused there and then branch out, because you can branch out 30 different ways from the Four Noble Truths. You can branch out many different ways from the Noble Eightfold Path. So if you start with your focus on, let me really kind of understand the Four Noble Truths. Let me really understand the Noble Eightfold Path. And you can go to Noble Eightfold Path retreats. Like I do a Zoom retreat, Noble Eightfold Path. In a couple of weeks, I'm doing a 4 Foundations of Mindfulness Zoom retreat, right? You can go on different monastics. They do retreats. They do Dhamma talks. You can go on YouTube and see Dhamma talks about these things. And then that can help you learn a little bit about what you're reading that will be beyond your comprehension, because you're new and you haven't been able to really, you haven't put in the time yet to start to really understand what's going on, right? That comes with time. That comes with years of practice. And so that's what I would say. Focus on Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path. Sophia says, how to work on going forth one day without pressuring myself, pushing too hard. So first things first is practice. Keep following the path. That's number one. Because no matter if you're a layperson or a monastic, you're following the Noble Eightfold Path. And so whether you're going to be a monastic in the future, who knows? Just focus on the path. Watch the path. See how insights arise. See how observe your nibbida, right? Disenchantment for the world. This doesn't mean hatred of the world. Very different. I've seen people go into monastic life with a hatred for the world. They don't last. Because guess what? The world is in the monastery. So you don't escape the world by going to the monastery. That's mistake number one. So as you practice and as you develop faith and confidence in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, as you develop a disenchantment for the lay life, things don't grab you as much anymore. You'd rather go to the monastery than go to the bar or the club for the weekend. These kind of things, that this gradual progression of wanting to spend more time inclining your mind towards practice and being around people who are likewise. Right? You observe that. And then, you can contemplate. You can ask yourself, is the monastic life for me? You can pose this question to yourself and then wait for an answer. Like, really ask yourself this question. And the answer might not come in words, but there might be a strong feeling, right? A certain draw. When after I kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what, I think I want to become a monastic. It was 4 years from that point to the time I went to the monastery. I had a career and a business, and I had car payments and all kinds of things. I had to gradually gradually unload, gradually get to the point where I could move out. And during that time, what I would do is, in my mind, I would kind of put like a scale. And then one part of the scale was like the best possible lay life I could think of. And the other part of the scale was monastic life. And I would just kind of imagine that, and I would just watch my mind. And my mind would like lean towards one or the other. Mostly it leaned toward monastic life. Mostly. Every once in a while, there was a strong craving or whatever, and it kind of wavered a little bit more towards lay life. But it was moving towards, it was like, yes, I think this monastic life is the way to go. And so I felt a calling. I felt a draw. I felt the Dhamma was so important in my life that I wanted to live it. And I eventually wanted to teach it. I wanted to share the Dhamma and spread the Dhamma in America. Now the Americas. To have more people like myself, because the Dhamma was so impactful to me, so beneficial to me. I was so much gratitude for those who came to America and brought it here and who teach it to Americans, that I said, I want to pass that forward. So that was always going to be something I was going to do. I ended up starting it a lot earlier than I expected that I was going to do it. But, such is my karmic trajectory, as Bhante Nalio told me. And so, it's a matter of checking in with your mind, kind of observing your inclinations. And, it got to the point for me where I was like, I'm inclining towards doing this. And my intuition, my gut says that this is for me. But even if it isn't, even if I don't make it to the monastic, to the process, the 2-year process to become a monastic, or B, I become a monastic and then later disrobe, at the very least, I knew that if I didn't try it, I would regret it later in life. So at the very least, I said, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try it. And here I am, 7 years later. And so it's something you have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask yourself these questions. Look for the answers. Start spending time at monasteries as much as you can. Get to know monastics. And get to kind of start to observe the monastic life. Ask the monastics lots of questions. And through that process and through your continued practice, you'll start to know if it's for you, or at the very least, you would want to do it so that you don't regret it. You can't push yourself too hard, because so for instance, one of the things that I noticed in my mind, especially in the early days when I became a monk, I had to tell my mind that I chose to become a monk and that I could leave it at any time. Like when I was really full of either craving, or I wanted to kind of, do like an old lay life habit, or I maybe even thought, well, maybe it might be easier to be a layperson. I had to reflect. I said, nobody kind of threw me. I wasn't, I'm not a prisoner. I chose to do this. I wanted to do this. I went through a lot. I went through hell to get to this point to become a monastic. And I'm a monastic. And I could quit at any time. And when I I haven't had to tell my mind this for a bunch of years, but in those first couple of years, I had to say, you know what? Yeah, I can quit at any time. And my mom would be like, oh yeah, I can quit at any time. Okay, let's keep going. Right? So it's like, as long as I gave my mind the out, and my mind wanted to stay. My mind didn't feel trapped anymore. So pushing too hard, pressuring yourself, not a good thing. Especially because that could lead you to making a decision that is maybe not going to be best for you. Right? So be honest with yourself completely. Observe your practice, observe your path, and then you'll know. Do high karma gain nirvana, and is nirvana part of the Pure Land or Western Pure Land of the 3 stages of heaven? No, Nibbana is not a place. Nibbana is, I don't even know if I want to call it a state, because it's beyond conceptions and conventions. Nibbana is something that cannot really be described or understood. Because of that, because we live in a conventional world and we deal in concepts, it's hard to understand what Nibbana is, other than its extinguishment. Yeah? And the Buddha is asked, does the Tathagata exist or not exist after death? And he won't answer. Probably because he can't, because it's beyond conceptions and conventions. So exist and not exist is a convention, right? So we can't really understand Nibbana without attaining Nibbana. So if you become a non-returner, you can be born in the divine abodes and then become awakened from there. One hell of a guy says, how can I reflect on the nature of the body as a subha, anicca, dukkha, anatta without developing aversion, ill will, dosa, etc.? Well, this is perfect. If you reflect on the nature of the body in all of those, then you won't develop ill will. Right? Because along with the asubha, which is understanding that the body is not beautiful, right? That we have this intoxication with body. The Buddha says we have an intoxication with youth, with health, and with life. Right? We have an intoxication with the body, our bodies, and the bodies of others. And so what you're trying to do is, so say you have a graph. Over here is intoxication with the body. Over here is hatred of the body and complete revulsion of the body. What you're trying to do is meet in the middle. On the one side is not good, and nor is the other side. That's not good either. So you're trying to balance yourself. Right? You're not trying to gross yourself out. That's not what mindfulness of death practices, patikula manasikara, which is the satipatthana word for these practices. That's not what this is about. It's about understanding this body without any rose-colored glasses, without any delusion. This body is just what it is. It's just a biological machine, and it goes through its processes. Right? And we have been born into this body, and eventually we will cease from this body. And that's anicca, right? Impermanent, unstable, undependable. This body's not stable. This body's not dependable. If I cling to this body, if I cling to youth, because I have an intoxication with youth and health, if I cling to health, then I get sick and then I suffer. If I cling to youth, I get old and then I suffer. So reflecting and understanding, patikula manasikara. Patikula means against the slope. What is against the slope? It's against our intoxication. When we practice these practices, the 31 parts of the body, the charnel ground contemplations, when we practice these practices, we are going against the slope. We are bringing ourselves back to a balance. We have to check if we're going too far. If we become so disgusted with this body that maybe we don't want to take care of it, maybe we want to kill ourselves, maybe we want to do all kinds of things, way too far. Way too far. We see people, some people translate things like they say repulsion, right? And repulsive is one of those things where we have a certain connotation in English, but it simply means to repulse, to go against. That's what repulsive means. But our connotation is that it means repulsive. It just simply means to repulse. You push something away, you repulse it. So it's important to understand that, I don't see any evidence where the Buddha is really trying to make you be so disgusted with the body. We see evidence to the contrary, because we see the monks that kill themselves, right? Because the Buddha taught them this and they took it way too far. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. So if you keep it all in perspective and you practice in a balanced way, then you won't go too far. Hello, Douse. Welcome. Hello, PGS, Vidora 1, Gitanjali. All right. Roberta has a question. As a monk, what happens if you're cranky around others on retreat? Depends. Some monks get, really agitated and they do unskillful things towards other people. Some monks observe the crankiness and they know how to make sure that they know what to do so that it doesn't, cause the monk, it doesn't cause themselves suffering or other people suffering. So it totally depends on the monastic. Totally depends on how far they are in their practice, how well they've developed insight in their practice. Monks are people too. Monks get cranky. Monks get angry. I've seen it myself. I've seen very, 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 very senior monastics get angry. All right, you have to not get angry. You have to be pretty hot. You have to be Arya Sangha. You have to be basically non-returner to not get angry. Right? I've seen these monks have all kinds of different human mind states because they're human. There's a diverse way that monks will act. Now, of course, in front of lay people, you just like anybody, when you're in front of people you don't know or who might judge you, you kind of put on a persona, you put on a bit of an act, right? And this is why I don't like putting on acts and faces. This is why I tell people like I'm so very undignified in many ways. And I talk about how I fail and break precepts and things like that. Most monks don't do that, right? Because they're trained that you're supposed to make sure that the lay people think, that you don't cause a bad reputation of the Sangha. But monks don't become perfect and then become monastics. They become monastics to become perfect. Just like lay people take on the 5 precepts, are you as lay people that you are perfect in the 5 precepts before you even took the 5 precepts? I doubt it. I doubt you're perfect in the 5 precepts now. Just the same, monks are not, unless they're arahants, monks are not perfect in the Vinaya either. It's all training. It's all developing. Right? So this is important to understand. John says, as a beginning meditator, I mostly focus on Vipassana meditation. I would like to start adding in metta meditation. What's the best way to add this to your routine? I don't know. You have to develop it for yourself. Right? You have to figure out what is going to be the routine that works for you. And so what you do is you test and you try. You figure it out. Right? You think, oh, let me try metta meditation here. Maybe I do metta in the morning. Maybe I do it in the evening. Maybe I do it before I sit and follow do Vipassana. Maybe I do it after. It's up to you, right? You practice it. It's a practice, and then you practice it, and then figure out what works for you. So things like metta is very much like satipatthana, where that you could do it anytime, anywhere. You can do it as long as you're awake. You can practice metta. You can do it while you're sitting. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it anytime. So there's no best time to practice. Well, yes, there is best time to practice metta all the time. That's the best time to practice metta all the time. At the end of Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Buddha says one should develop this mindfulness. This is called divinely dwelling here. When you have a mind of metta, it's like your mind is dwelling in heaven. So you should practice metta as much as possible throughout the day and in any way. Practice lots of metta. If you want to, to developing it as a habit, if you already have a habit that I sit down during this time, or during the day I take a break to whatever, follow my body or whatever, then okay, maybe that's a good time to remember to do metta. Whatever your practice is, you can do metta before it. You can do metta after it. It's up to you. There's no, other than all the time, there's no perfect time to do metta. Whatever works for you. That's one of the great things about the practice. That's one of the exciting and interesting things about the practice is you get to develop the practice that works for you. Right? So investigate, test it out. Trial and error, figure it out. Sin says, I'm going to need a glossary. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If you think that there's a glossary, there's some Dhamma words that I probably have not even seen yet. And I've been doing this for 15 years, right? It's deep. And so don't think, it's in the beginning, it can be very common to kind of get lost in like, oh my, this is so much. It's a lifetime practice. If you think about it as a lifetime practice, you're not in a rush. Just learn slowly as you go, and you'll be okay. Hola, Miguel. Buenas noches. Miguel is joining us from Chile. John asks, where can we find more about my Zoom retreats? So if you just go to my website, if you just Google me, Bhante J. Bhikkhu Jayasara, your website would probably come up. The website is muggaseka.org. I could probably put it in the chat. All right. So let's see. All right, had a little bit of a jump here. Edward says, is it possible to live independently, not clinging to anything in the world as a householder with job and family? So this sounds like it's, you got this line from Satipatthana. So what I would say is that this is really talking about a mental state. Nobody actually lives independently, not even monastics. Monastics literally, quite literally, cannot live independently because our very lives, our very existence depends on the generosity of others. Right? Lay people are the ones who give us our food and our medicine and our lodgings and our clothing. Right? So nobody completely lives independently. This is a mind state. Right? So to live independently would mean that not that, like as a monk, even we'll say, people will come and give me, and will support me, and I have gratitude for that. But I shouldn't get overly attached to them. Like, oh, they're so generous to me. They're so nice. I should spend more time with them. I should, be, I should be at their call anytime and things like that. That's too much for a monastic. Right? This is why you can't really be friends with a monastic. You can be friends with a monastic, but you can't be friends with a monastic in terms of like a layperson is friends with another layperson. Right? Monastics need to have that separation. So as a householder with a job and family, can you develop mind states, at least temporarily, that are independent and are not clinging? Yes. Is it a lot harder? Yes. Is it going to be temporary and impermanent? Yes. So, but you can, it's all about the mind. I can't really say much. I'm not a biological father, right? So I've never had a biological kid of my own. So I can't really say in terms of that attachment and how you would deal with that. But for most other things, some of my deepest states of meditation and of samadhi I've ever been in were at my office at work, not on a retreat or at the monastery. So I would not downplay or discourage the ability for a layperson to, to practice well and to have a mind, even in the middle of a busy life, that can be pretty detached, or unattached is probably a better word. But you can't compare, being a householder with a family to being a monastic in terms of numbers of attachments. Even monastics will have attachments to family and friends, right? Unless you're awakened, you're going to have an attachment to your mother. I mean, unless she was an absolutely horrible person, or maybe, you know, things like that. But most people are going to have an attachment to their parents, you know, even as a monastic. It's the way it is. Sele or Sele says, clearly understanding that self-consciousness is not me and only an illusion of self, how to overcome it totally. Follow the Noble Eightfold Path. You have to develop your insight. You have to develop your mindfulness. You have to really start to understand the mind and the body at very deep levels, developing insight and wisdom into the nature of this mind and body. And when you do that, then naturally, any kind of belief that whatever I'm viewing is me, mine, or myself starts to fall away. You start to realize, oh, I thought this was me, but actually, no, it's not. You know, but this comes with wisdom and insight on the path. Nico says, why is there rebirth if the Buddhist does create a funeral for them? Funeral is not for the person who died. Funeral is for the people who are still around. The person who died is, the Buddha calls it, it's like the body lies upon the ground like a useless tree stump. What's left after the person dies is just meat. It's just, you know, it's just dust. You practice charnel ground contemplation. You reflect on the decomposition of the body until the point where the bones turn to dust. Funeral is not for the person who died, at least not in Buddhism. I mean, maybe like there are cultures where they will do like rites where you know, you have to bury the person with things that they will need in the afterlife. Like in ancient Egypt, you bury them with certain things so that they can get, you know, get past the various gods or, you know, deities that are in their way to going to the afterlife, right? But that's not how it is in Buddhism, right? So there's no funeral, doesn't matter. The being is gone. The being is already on their way to their next rebirth, whether it's instant or whether it's a couple, you know, weeks from that after their death, whatever, the being is going to be born again. So the rebirth and funeral don't have a major connection there. All right. Christina has a question. I'm struggling with the state of the world. The pain feels so heavy. What advice do you have for a layperson who's trying to practice metta when feeling so full of sadness with the world? So first things first is we need to practice developing a wider, a grander perspective. There's nothing going on in the world right now that you know about that isn't going on in the world in multiple places at any time. You might hear about something in the news and that gives you an emotion, but you don't know about the same thing happening 5 or 6 other places. And because you don't know about it, you don't think about it and no emotion arises. But this is the nature of the world. The nature of the world is that it's full of beings with greed, hatred, and delusion. And beings with greed, hatred, and delusion don't see things clearly. And so they don't act clearly. They don't know what's good for them. They don't know what's good for others, and they don't know what's good for both. They act in the world of the world. So when you try to understand this, like for instance, I'll give you an example. At any time in the world, there's about 20 genocides happening. Do you know about any more than one or two, maybe? Maybe you hear about the Uyghurs in China. Do you know about the other 20? You don't, do you? Well, how come you're not emotional for them? This is the understanding. So the Buddha says there's two kinds of fools. A person who takes on a responsibility that is not theirs, and a person who does not take on a responsibility that is theirs. You have to understand, and this is the Buddha understands this very clearly, that the world is not your responsibility. You can't take on the suffering of the world. It's too much for any one person to bear. The only person who can do that is Atlas, right? From Greek mythology, who holds the world on his shoulders, who holds the sky, the heavens on his shoulders. We're just regular humans. We can't do that. It's too much for us. It's far too much for us. So we have to understand where we, put our effort, where we put our empathy. We practice lots of metta, right? Metta is a good thing to practice. Metta is not emotional. Metta is practicing goodwill and friendliness for all beings. Now, of course, emotions can arise, but it's not it's not about the emotion. The emotion is like a side effect of the metta. As your mind is temporarily being released from ill will and aversion and envy and all of these negative mind states, and your mind is so light and so peaceful, and you see, I have no enemies in the world. People might see me as an enemy, but everybody is a friend to me, right? And you build up that mind state, and then that mind state has no impact of somebody on the other side of the world. Has nothing to do with them. You can't send them metta. You can't send them anything that's going to help them. Right? Millions of beings, well, billions, really, billions, the 7, 8, whatever billion of us are on this planet, and also all the trillions of animals and bugs and things like that, we're all suffering. We're all in the samsaric state. It's way too much for any being. Even the Buddha. The Buddha knew that he couldn't even save anybody. He could only point the way. And beings had to walk the path. The Buddha had wise compassion, a compassion that arose out of wisdom and insight, not out of mundane compassion that arises out of like emotion related to our in-group and out-group preferences and all of these kind of things. So when, the Buddha could see, the Buddha was asked at one point, how many people, will all beings become awakened and leave samsaric state? And the Buddha says, I'm not concerned with how many such beings will leave the samsaric state, but I do know that any such beings that do will do so by following the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? So we need to have a balanced perspective and a balanced understanding and an understanding of what we can do most of the time we can't do much of anything about anything going on in the world. But we can do something about our local area, right? Our neighborhood, our town, our city, less so our country, but even still a bit of our country. So you can focus your time and your effort in doing good deeds and trying to help people that you can, and trying to come to a balance on this level of feeling that you have in relation to the world. You can reflect. If I keep, thinking a lot about all these things that are happening, and so many things are happening that I don't even know about. If I just keep reflecting on that and being mired in that, I can't help anybody. The Buddha says that if somebody's mired in the mud and you want to help them, but you're mired in the mud, you can't help them. I did a job, but my career before this was child protective services, right? Social work, case management for child protective services, these kind of things. And anybody who does these kind of helper jobs, you realize, like, if you're like with your clients, all crying with your clients, this is so horrible, you can't help them. You're mired. If you get down in the mud with your clients, you're useless to them. You're absolutely useless to them. Okay? That's why it's important to understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is somebody's experiencing something you've experienced, so you know what it's like, or you're also experiencing what they're experiencing at the same time, right? You're experiencing their suffering because you're suffering as well. That's sympathy. Empathy is you're recognizing and understanding that the person is suffering. You see that they're suffering, but you're not drawn it. You're not like down in the mud with them. You're not suffering with them, but you understand their suffering. An empathetic person can help you. A sympathetic person, not as much, because they're also deep in the suffering. So it's better to be empathetic. It's good to understand that to have a broader view that there is suffering in the world, more suffering than you'll ever know about. It's also good to keep your mind in the right perspective and in your own practice and your own development. And then also what good things you can do to help others. And the rest is out of your control. You can't hold the world. The world is out of your responsibility. It's not your responsibility. Focus on what is your responsibility. Welcome, Sud. Shadow of Label, Edward. Jordan has a question. I was wondering what I should do about insects in my house. Is it okay to use pesticides as a preventative measure? What do you guys do at the monasteries? So when it comes to insects, what I'll say is this. First things first is you need to recognize that even if you don't see it, even if you have a brand new house, there are beings that live in that house with you. They're in the floorboards, they're in the walls, many, many different kinds of bugs, even mice, right? This is a normal thing. Humans have lived with these beings as long as we've had houses, as long as we've had shelters. Humans have lived with these beings. So what I would say first is to really reflect on, are these beings really harming anything in my house? What's wrong with these beings being in my house? Spiders, ants. It can get hard when you start talking about things like fleas, lice, and bed bugs, and you have, family members that you have to worry about their health. It gets tougher then. But mostly, I think developing a mindset of living with the bugs is very important. Because because it's out of sight, out of mind, we don't think that there's any bugs in our house. We don't think there's any mice in our house. There are. Trust me. I can guarantee you that there are. It's the way it is. We just don't see them. Right? And as a house gets a bit older, and as a house gets a bit more holes, maybe you see more. But beings get in the house. Beings live in the house with you. You need to recognize that. You have to understand that. Beings are in the house. Do your best to live with them as best as you can. If it gets to the point where they're being harmful, right? You kind of can't really live together. Then you have to make hard decisions. Samsara is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Nobody gets out of the samsaric state. Nobody gets out of this life clean. Unless you're an arahant. If you become awakened, then you get out of this life clean. But everybody else, nobody gets out of it clean. You have a family and you're in a house and, there's no way to do a kind of, a trick that gets rid of bed bugs, without killing them. Well, you have to make a decision. Right? Life is a samsaric state. Life is not always easy, black and white. There's lots of gray. But in general, I would say, unless they're really harmful, and yes, you would think, oh my God, well, this bug, it's dirty. It might be dirty. It may not. You might just be overly sanitary. And that is such a thing. All the doing the alcohol on our hands and the showering every day and all that stuff, actually that harms us. You'd be surprised. So live with the bugs you can and make whatever decision you feel is the right one when you need to make it. Jim is lurking. Hello, Jim. At Bhavana Society was in the woods, right? So when you're in the woods, it's a little bit different. Like here, Empty Cloud, I mean, there's basically, there's some woods, but it's mostly just houses for miles and miles around. So it won't be as many things like mice, but they're still there. Like at Bhavana Society, 25 years ago, I saw, writings about problems with mice being around the cooking stuff. And when I was there, there's problems with mice going for where the food is. And probably Bhavana Society lasts another 25 years. There's going to be mice going where the food is, right? I've watched cooks do all kinds of traps. And, some of you might know the term Rube Goldberg, right? They'll set like traps on traps and try to all these things. And the mice are like Tom from Tom and Jerry, that cartoon when I grew up. The mice are just looking at these things like, you think we're that stupid? No. Right? You can even put like cheese and they're like, Yeah, no, you're not getting. And then sometimes the mice figure out how to get the cheese without triggering the trap. And then you might even have a cat, and you think, well, the cat will take care of the mice, and the cat's useless, right? The mice are just laughing at the cat, right? This happens, and and then at night you go in to get a drink, and you flip the switch, and there's cockroaches. And you think, oh my God, cockroaches, they're so dirty. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And when we think of cockroaches, we think of like, poor people's houses that are in like rundown slums. But cockroaches are in your walls. Cockroaches are, they live with humans. They have for a long time. That's the way it is. So long as the cockroaches didn't, get into any food or cause me any harm, I just lived with the cockroaches. Hey, cockroaches, how you doing today? It's the way it is. All right, Sid has a question. Can you please kindly explain what is liberation of mind by loving kindness and how one can practice it in daily life to help achieve liberation of mind through loving kindness as a layperson? Metta Ceto Vimutti is simply practicing lots of metta, and the metta frees your mind from anger and ill will. The mind is being liberated through metta of ill will and negative mind states. That's what that means. It doesn't mean, it means this is temporary, right? Because your mind is not completely liberated until you're an arahant. But when you practice lots of metta, you can liberate your mind from ill will on a temporary basis, and you can weaken it so that it when anger and ill will arises in you, it has less power over you. That's what this means. Metta Ceto Vimutti is not like some kind of special other technique or practice. It just means practicing metta, and through metta, your mind is released from ill will. That's what that means. So however you practice metta, you can develop Metta Ceto Vimutti. Shadow of Label. Bhante, have you ever meditated at the dentist so you wouldn't need the anesthetic to numb the area? I failed miserably and cried all day when I get to a tooth implant. I've heard of one monk who's an interesting. He's a senior monastic. He's a very senior monastic. Bhante Rahula is his name, and I heard a story of him doing some dental work without anesthesia. But honestly, to me, that would fall under mortification. You don't need to say like, okay, yeah, whatever, do the operation on me. I don't need any anesthetic. That's going a bit too far, I think. I think it's perfectly fine that if you have a operation or whatever, or if you have a dental work, then it's okay to have anesthetics. I remember, maybe about 12 years ago, I had root canal. And I was a Buddhist at that point. I had been practicing for some years by that point. And so when I did the root canals, and they did the anesthesia, they did the numbing. It's not really anesthesia where they knock you out. They numb, and then they go, and I can remember just trying to, okay, this is going to be a good time for me to practice Satipatthana. And it was over like 2 or 3 sessions of an hour and a half each. So this was a good, 4 hours of stuff that I needed to go through. And so I'd go in and I would just try to observe like the feeling of what was happening and the pressure, and just really practice mindfulness as much as I could. And it was a brutal experience, even with the numbing. They put the needles, to numb the area, and it was rough. I can remember it's like, oh, okay, I'm practicing, trying to endure, practicing. So all of these kind of situations, yeah, you can practice. And just recently, just in the last couple of months, actually, I've had to have, because of all the work I had like over a decade ago, I've had to have, things have deteriorated. Those root canals deteriorated, and I had to have, like, one tooth was removed and another tooth was re-root canaled and things like that. And thankfully, none of this was nearly as painful as the original root canals because all the nerves were gone, right? But even still, when I would go to the dentist, I was just in the dentist 2 weeks ago, and I got to go to the dentist again next week. And I'm in the seat, and I just observe what's happening. Just observe the feeling, observe the drilling or the this or whatever they're doing, and just try to be present with it and to investigate it as much as I can in all the different ways that I can do it. And you can do that with any experience. Edward says, thank you, Bhante. I have added the word no to my practice. I don't know where you got that from, whatever I said, but it's a good thing. Saying no is perfectly acceptable and perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, so many of us are trained that we never want to say no, and we need to say no. Setting boundaries, saying no is a good thing. So if you've added developing the ability to say no to your practice, good job. Sophia says, is it possible to send metta to somebody who has already died? Yes, but again, you're not sending anything to them. Metta is not magic. Metta is about your own mind, right? You can practice, you can send metta towards this person if they die. It's like, may they have a good rebirth. May they be able to listen to the Dhamma. May they eventually attain the bliss of nirvana, such like that. But that's just for your own mind. That's not giving them anything, right? That's not really, you're not sending them like magical waves of friendliness that they're going to experience. That's not what metta is. Metta is practicing to abandon ill will and aversion in all the little nooks and crannies of your mind. So when you're practicing metta for that person, really you're practicing metta for yourself. That's the important thing. So you could practice metta for them. You could practice metta for an inanimate object. It's like maybe every day you see this thing and you just hate it. You just don't like the look of it. It's just annoying when Bhante dings with it. It just, the sound, it really grates on you. And you say, well, this is just causing me suffering. Why don't I just practice metta for this, right? It's an inanimate object. It has nothing to do. It has to do with my own mind. There's agitation and aversion that's arising in my own mind towards this thing. And you might think, well, that's silly, but observe yourself. How many inanimate objects do you have agitation towards? Cars, desks, whatever. You could probably see that maybe there's 10 or 15 things that you have agitation towards, right? And, your refrigerator is on the brink. Your washer, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you get agitated towards it. Metta is for your own mind. Metta is really, and when you practice metta, then, you can have the feelings of friendship and goodwill to do good things. You could do good deeds in that person's name. And if they know about it in whatever life they're at, they may or they may not know that you do good deeds in their name. But if they know about it, they can say, oh, this is a good deed that this person is doing. I can rejoice in that good deed, and that's also a good deed. But other than that, no, sending metta is not about, going to other people. All right, we're coming to the end. Douse has a wonderful comment. Do you need anesthesia? No, I have the Salla Sutta with me. Yeah. The Salla Sutta might help a little bit, but it's going to be rough. All right, so go back to the question. CB, do you have any tips for keeping a meaningful practice and a clear mind for someone leaving the monastery and returning to a busy lay life? Regular life is not a retreat. That you have to understand that, right? So if you are going to stay at a monastery for a time, or you're going for a retreat, you might develop, your mind might go very nice and calm, and you might develop lots of zeal and desire for the practice. But as soon as you go back to lay life, that wears off over time. I experienced that when I would, go on retreats, and when I would visit the monastery, then go back to lay life, that would wear off. So what you need to do is, on fairly regular intervals, go back to the monastery, listen to Dhamma talks, be with Dhamma friends. Okay? You need to do these things so that you keep the zeal and the desire for the practice strong. Even if it's once a month, once every 2 months, you go back to the monastery. Like I had to drive 5 hours to go to, Bhavana Society, where I could, be with Dhamma friends and listen to good Dhamma and practice and study. And, I would do that like every 2 months, every 3 months. I would go for a weekend just to get back into, just to have a brief experience of being away, taking myself out of my habitual environments, habitual tendencies, getting out of that for a little bit. Because when you go back to it, eventually those habitual tendencies in that habitual environment is going to wear down your desire and zeal for the practice. That's normal. So you have to do things. And, honestly, going on Zoom, like going on Monk Chat or logging on to hear Bhante such as such talk, that'll help a little bit, but it's no replacement for getting out of your habitual areas, going to a place, secluding yourself physically, developing mental seclusion, being with good Dhamma friends, and then fueling yourself, refueling your batteries to go back. Being, doing things online can help a little bit to refuel the batteries, but it's not a replacement for it. Trust me, I know, because I was the only Buddhist person I knew in my daily life. I was the only Buddhist person I knew in my daily life until I moved to the monastery to become a monastic, right? With the exceptions of every couple months when I could go to Bhavana, all of my learning was online. My Sangha was online. The monks I listened to was online. And that's good. But it doesn't overcome the normal habits that you have strong enough for long enough. You need to keep refueling your batteries every once in a while, going back to the monastery, being with Dhamma friends, secluding yourself, getting out of your habits. Every time I got to leave New Jersey and go to West Virginia, that was like, okay, New Jersey's gone. Peace. See you later. I'm going to West Virginia for the next couple of days. And, that would kind of give me a little mini vacation. And then I could go back refreshed and refueled. All right, friends. So it is 9:00 my time, and we have come to the end of questions. So that is the end of Monk Chat. So until next time, friends, Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy, practice well, and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again.